I remember where I was the first time my friends and I beat Andros in Star Fox 64. We'd been trading controllers all day, but Brian was the one who pulled it off. I remember the light streaming through the big windows of his media room, the way it flanked his TV. I remember we cheered. I was 8 years old. I also remember introducing it to my then girlfriend, now wife, more than a decade later, and I remember watching my friends play through it for the first time earlier this year. Normally, I try not to compare one piece of art to another when I'm writing a review. It's bad practice and poor criticism. But Wild Blue Skies invites nostalgic comparisons like this at every turn, and it's lesser for them. It often pulls directly from Star Fox 64, and the stuff it gets wrong shows it doesn't always understand what makes that game great. It's at its best when it has the courage to be itself, to take inspiration from Star Fox 64 rather than copy it outright. Unfortunately, those moments are rare. I don't enjoy making reviews like this, but Wild Blue Skies has left me no choice. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Long ago, the evil Grimclaw, once chief engineer of the army, was defeated by a team of fighter pilots and exiled to a far-off region. Now, Grimclaw has returned, and it's up to a new generation of that team to stop him once again. Sound familiar?
And free the Lilat system once again.
A lot of the characters map one-to-one to Star Fox's cast, too. Bowie Stray's skill and leadership make him an admirable but unoriginal replacement for Fox. Chuck Barbacoa fills in for Peppy as the team's mentor and grizzled veteran. Thorn is an overprepared lizard who reminds me of Slippy. The highlight, though, is Ro Whitetail, wonderfully voiced by Susie Young. She's Falco if he was quieter and an even better pilot, and by far my favorite member.
No time for cutscene, boys. Keep pushing forward.
So the characters are eerily similar and the plot is basically the same, but that's not necessarily a deal breaker for a game clearly paying homage to a classic, right? Well, when I tell you that Wild Blue Skies is essentially just Star Fox 64, I'm not kidding. This rail shooter has you pilot a ship through a branching series of 6 levels and chase high scores, with optional objectives that determine what the next stage will be. You can pick up bombs, find power-ups for your blasters, and use charge shots to take out groups of enemies for a score multiplier. That's all fine. Star Fox's structure is wonderful, but play Wild Blue Skies for a minute and it becomes clear that it doesn't always understand what makes Star Fox work. For example, Fox's R-Wing is a nimble beast capable of whatever you ask of it, while Bowie's Cloud Cutter handles like a racing yacht. It's fast, sure, but it don't turn so good unless you tilt in a direction.
Aw, maybe next time, Bowie.
Similarly, Star Fox's bombs explode in a star pattern that makes it easy to line them up with enemy formations, while Blue Skies are just big circles that never feel accurate, and you can't compensate for that by locking on with the charge shot first. These might sound like small changes, but the net result is that nothing ever feels quite as smooth or satisfying as you want it to be. Even the laser upgrades come with caveats. You lose them once your health drops below a certain threshold, but that threshold doesn't seem consistent or predictable. On top of that, the starting blaster is so bad that you're often better off restarting certain levels entirely if you lose your upgrades.
Looks like your plans just got derailed.
That's the other big problem. Wild Blue Skies is intent on punishing you for making mistakes. Healing items are rare, extra lives only appear in set spots, and you only heal by a set amount between missions. Combine that with blaster upgrades that seem to just arbitrarily go away, and a single bad sequence can end your entire run. I respect that Wild Blue Skies wants to be challenging. I like challenging games, but Star Fox isn't brilliant because it's hard. It's brilliant in part because it gives you room to mess up and still make a triumphant comeback. I've beaten Andros without either of my wings, lost my lasers in Area 6 and defeated Star Wolf anyway, and been down to my last pixel of life and played well enough to pull out a clutch win. You can clutch it out in Wild Blue Skies, but it's more dependent on your knowledge of the level and less on moment-to-moment skill. To its credit, Wild Blue Skies does do some neat score-chasing things. You get medals by collecting letters scattered throughout each level, and finding them is fun. Ribbons, on the other hand, come from getting a high score, so landing charge shot combos and knowing the levels is important. But you also get score bonuses for things like finding all the letters, keeping your team alive, finishing at full health, and taking out a boss quickly. When you nail all of them in a single run, it feels pretty great.
Looks like we made it through.
But Even here, Wild Blue Skies stumbles. The letter pickups are a good idea, but once you know where they are, maxing your score becomes an act of rote memorization. Go this way, kill this thing, etc. It's nice that you can restart a level at any time, or replay one after you finish it at the cost of a life. But it still feels restrictive, and it's easy to spend too many lives and handicap yourself for the rest of a run if you're not careful.
No!
Look, I could live with all of that. I don't expect perfection. Where Wild Blue Skies loses me, though, is in its level design. It's not even that the levels are bad, it's that many of them are almost one-to-one reskins of Star Fox levels. Mine's is just Fortuna. It's literally the same level. You fly around, kill some enemies, and then the Prowlers, show up. They come in low out of the rising sun, just like Starwolf does in Fortuna, and then you fight them on a time limit, just like in Fortuna. The difference between them is entirely in the visual design and the fact that your team planted the bomb instead of disarming it.
Alright, I've landed the bomb!
It is, in every way that matters, the same level, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if Nintendo's kennel of attack lawyers is already frothing at the mouth.
You'll be seeing your dad soon, Fox.
In so directly copying Star Fox, Wild Blue Skies' blemishes come into clear view. It's not inherently a problem that you can't U-turn or somersault, but when you're going to recreate entire levels where those things are part of what makes them fun, their omission is a real issue. I can't somersault, but the Prowlers can't either, so once I get behind them, it's over. It might be cute if Wild Blue Skies pulled this trick once as a loving nod, but it happens several times.
Let's squeeze through!
Iceberg is just Zonus, complete with the searchlights, and it's not nearly as good. Temple is just Katina, with walkers instead of an Independence Day mothership, and enemy ships come out of the base that you're trying to protect, because that makes sense. Foundry is literally just bowls, with the rotating arena enemy placement and Prowler fight toward the end.
Here's to an honorable bout, bomber.
All near exact copies, minus the lasers. The first level is Corneria, down to the placement of its opening enemies and the optional hard path that requires you to follow Thorn through some tricky flying. I could keep going, but we'd be here all day.
You'll never defeat Grimclaw!
My Emperor! I failed you!
By blatantly pulling from and overly referencing these levels, Wild Blue Skies also cheapens their best moments. For example, the searchlights in Zonus are a core part of that mission's design. You're sneaking through it, and shooting them before they see you keeps Andross's forces from knowing you're there. You miss one, and you not only get knocked down in difficulty, you raise the alarm. In its equivalent, there are only searchlights because there were searchlights in Zonus. There's no story to it, and nothing cool happens if you miss them. They're just there. Wild Blue Skies can at least soar when it's not openly aping Star Fox. Canyon is my favorite level, not just because it's gorgeous and it doesn't have an obvious reference behind it, but because of this section where the camera tilts and you fly up a waterfall. It's an awesome and novel sequence that never happens again. Cloudtop's "the boss is part of the level" gimmick recalls Sector X's, but it's different enough that it doesn't feel cheap, and lighting up Grimclaw's forces while you're skimming clouds rules.
Well, I'm having a blast!
And while I see parts of Meteo and Sector X in Hurricane, it's still visually stunning, and it doesn't feel like a copy of either. But then I'm back on a level I've been playing since I was 8 years old, and all I see are the ways it doesn't measure up, from the story to the enemy placement to the flying itself. And the levels always end the same way. There's no extra bosses, no warps, no feeling that I've actually changed an outcome beyond picking a route.
I had one job!
I have a theory that we're all chasing the way we felt when we were younger and things were new. I've been chasing Star Fox 64 for as long as I can remember, so has Nintendo. But the thing about chasing a feeling and experience is that you never get there just by doing the same thing again.
Never give up! Trust your instinct!
No Zelda ever made me feel the way Ocarina of Time did until Breath of the Wild threw out the rules and dared to try something else. It took me about 6.5 hours to get the ribbon on every level in Wild Blue Skies and the medal on most of them. The magic was only there when it was bold enough to be different.
Was fair play!
On my final run, I stuck to the hard path. After rolling through legally distinct Area 6, I hoped, I prayed, that the final level wouldn't just be Dollar Store Star Wolf again. I wanted to be surprised, but there they were, just like I remembered them. The same camera framing, more or less the same arena, just with lava this time, and letters to collect. Wild Blue Sky's true ending even copies Star Fox 64's final sequence. You know the one. It has none of the emotional impact because it never earns it. It's not enough to simply retrace the footprints of giants. You have to take the final steps yourself.
Blue Bombers, check in.
Wild Blue Skies is a decent rail shooter. When it finds the courage to be itself, to separate itself from what inspired it, it occasionally soars. But its slavish devotion to Fox McCloud's greatest adventure is ultimately its undoing. Too often, it's simply Star Fox 64, but worse. Worse fly, worse story, worse difficulty tuning. And some of these characters and missions are so similar that they start to border on legally questionable. I don't think this is malicious. I think these mistakes are born out of a deep-seated love for a game I also adore. Wild Blue Skies wants desperately to remind you of Star Fox 64, to make you feel the same things you did when you played it for the first time. But I'll never be 8 years old again, in that room, watching one of my friends do what had, up until that moment, been impossible. You can revisit the past, but you can't go back in time. You have to move forward.
Reviews director Tom Marks here with Will Borger to talk a little bit more about his Wild Blue Skies review. Will has been around reviewing action games for us, beat 'em ups, some sad walking games occasionally here and there. Will, you started this review talking about your love for Star Fox, so I don't think we have to go over, you know, your pedigree in the series, and if I asked you your favorite, I'm sure you would just say 64, so we don't have to belabor that point. Your review here was obviously focusing on the comparisons a lot, and rightfully so, and this idea, not that it was just, you know, an homage, but like, didn't do that as well and made missteps within that homage and then also did that stuff. But my question for you first off is, if somebody is not intimately familiar with the Star Fox series, maybe they didn't even play the remake earlier this year, do you think that this is a game that they would potentially enjoy more than you did without that sort of like, that checklist of, you know, knowing what it could have been?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. I think the answer is probably yes. I do think like there's an element of it that because it calls back so frequently and so many levels are either functionally identical with very minor changes or are very similar. If you've played the game a lot, and I've played 64 a lot, you're just like, I've kind of seen this before. If you haven't, it's going to be like, oh, that's cool, I haven't seen something like that. And there are plenty of cool moments. I do think some of the stuff that I talked about in the review is going to hit people regardless. Like the Cloud Cutter is a little wonky in terms of how it maneuvers. I think some people are going to be unhappy with the way that the game does its live system, or like the blasters as a default weapon until you upgrade them just don't really feel good. Like those problems extend beyond the comparison to 64.
This would not magically be an 8 or a 9 if you didn't have the Star Fox comparison.
No. And I think those problems, like Star Fox has similar problems too. If you lose your lasers on certain levels, it becomes very difficult. The difference is, I think for me, is that Star Fox kind of gives you the opportunity to fail forward in a way that Wild Blue Skies doesn't always. There were certain levels where if I lost my lasers, it was kind of like, okay, I'm just going to get to wherever the next life is, and then I'm going to restart, because it's actually better for me to replay than try to struggle through like with what I have. And I think those frustrations are the same. In the same way, I think weirdly, you might not appreciate some of the stuff that it does do that is different. I think the addition of the letters that you can collect through the levels is a nice like change. I do think there's a couple problems with it, but overall it's something that's like, oh, this is interesting. And the way it gives you bonus points for keeping your whole squad alive, or doing the boss really quickly, or not taking damage, like those things are good, and I think will appeal to you if you have or if you haven't played it. So it's a combination of both.
Sure. So I'm curious if you think that affected the experience of this game, the way that this game is going to be received as a result. Like, if we thought that Star Fox was just still sort of a dead series, would these ripped levels feel less egregious?
I think it's a yes and a no. I think the remake functionally throws that into very sharp relief, because now we have, you know, a modern version of that game that has God, even 64 is a remake. How many times have they made Lilac Wars? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this is the 4th time they've made that game. So I think that probably is true, that people wouldn't maybe be as familiar with it as someone who did play the remake recently and plays 64 like a couple times a year at least, just because I really like it. And that throws it in relief of like, especially if you're coming off the remake, or if that remake has inspired you to go back to the original release and check it out, you're going to be like, oh, I see this, right? So I do think that changes the conversation a little bit, but part of me also feels like Star Fox has such a active, still to this day, the original game, kind of score chasing community where people are looking for new records, new high scores. What's the most efficient way to do this? Can I do this without getting hit, right? That community is still very active. That game is still very beloved. And so I think that would be there, but I think what the remake is going to do is maybe people who weren't into that, who don't go back to it a couple of times a year like I do, who are not active in the score chasing community, like they're going to see it where they normally wouldn't. But I do think we would still see it regardless. It's just more people are going to feel that way, I think.
So in a broader sense, where do you think the line is between spiritual successor, homage, whatever you want to call it, and sort of stepping over that line and becoming a ripoff? Because one of the quickest examples that comes to my mind is Stardew Valley, which obviously did a lot different from Harvest Moon, but also the original pitch of that game to some extent was co-op Harvest Moon with some combat added. And, you know, that was sort of celebrated because Harvest Moon was in a doldrums at that point. But how do you delineate? Where is that line?
It's really tricky. The distinction for me is not that it can't feel like Star Fox or it's being too close to what Star Fox is there are certain levels in Wild Blue Skies that feel exactly the same as certain levels in Star Fox 64. It's not like, if there are differences, they are very functionally minor. The Star Wolf encounters, the Star Wolf equivalent team is the Prowlers. They come into this a lot because those levels are almost 1-to-1 for the levels in Star Fox 64. I think Wild Blue Skies' problem is maybe it does it one too many times. Like if you had just done Area 6, which is, you know, one of the all-time great rail shooter levels, people would have been like, cool, Area 6 rules. But you can't do every Star Wolf fight and the final boss, both versions of it, and Area 6, and Zonus, which is another level that's basically there. And it crosses the line of like, this is a cool thing that we're paying tribute to, and this stuff is here because Star Fox has it.
Okay, last question. You're not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, but like Nintendo is notoriously litigious. They just went through years of stuff over Power World. Does it feel like this has crossed that line?
Man, it's hard to say.
I mean, it's speculation, right?
Yeah. I think it's very hard to say that, like, this is copyright infringement or something, but, like, I do think it gets to the point. It's trickier with this because it's not just characters, the way mechanics work. Like, it's whole levels. And you're like, this doesn't feel right. I think it at some point, like, again, you know, out of love for the source material, like the Star Wolf fights are great. I can see why you'd want to do that, but put them in a different environment, give them some unique, they can't do something, right? And I feel like it just doesn't do that enough.
Yeah. Well, Will, thank you very much for talking with us a little bit more about your Wild Blue Skies review and the sort of odd dance of homage versus ripoff in that conversation. If you want more from Will, go check out his review of Dench Attack, a really cool game that needs more love in this world, speaking of colorful homages to other things as well. If you want more Star Fox, I guess, check out our review of Star Fox 64's remake from a couple of months ago. And for everything else, stick with IGN.